Well, hello and welcome to Stand in the Gap. I'm Sam Rohrer, and I'm going to be joined again today by Pastor Isaac Crockett. Now, if you're following any news at all, you know that I'm going to put it this way: the controlled news is totally dominated by COVID-19 issues, whether that's local or national or even international. And the COVID-19 narrative, as we generally are hearing, it says that, for instance, deaths from this virus are increasing every day, and overall it's going to increase. They're going to say, and they have been saying, that this pandemic has no solution right off until we get some vaccination, that it's going to be with us for maybe up to 2 years, that social distancing may be a way of life, that shaking hands with each other may be a thing of the past, and even bringing up the concept that, oh yes, there's going to be a second wave and a third wave, and it may be even more than we have. The point being that what we are hearing about this virus is really only negative, largely designed to create a fear and a despair among the people. The response is that we need more government and more regulations in order to produce the solution. Now, I'm not going to go down that direction quite so much today on this program with Isaac and I, but we are going to look at the issue that, in reality, when you have issues like this that confront us, one's worldview makes all the difference with whether there is a only despair response, a panic that's generated, that then we turn to government for answers rather than turn to God. Now, as believers, if you're watching this program, if you know Jesus Christ as your Savior, you know that for us, that if we move from this life, when we move from this life, we will step right into a turn to Jesus Christ. That's good news. It changes our attitude on living, changes our attitude on life, changes our attitude on our purposes for being here. And it's that we hope you pick up as we go through this program today. But there are some things that are actually happening as a result of COVID policies that are actually creating harm and actually causing the loss of life. And we're going to be talking about just 2 examples of that today, which you may not have thought about, but we want you to today. Our special guest is Toni McFadden. She's a pro-life and biblical encouragement speaker. She has a tremendous testimony of what God has done for her in her life, and she'll share just a bit of that with us as we talk with her in just a moment. But before I go to her right now, Isaac, I want to go to you, if I can, on the program. You're a pastor, you're a millennial pastor. You have counseled many young people. You've taught in public schools. You've worked as a social person in that space for a long time. Curious from your perspective, before there was ever a COVID and what we're talking about now, what did you see with working with young people in schools relative to their level of hope or expectation for satisfaction, perhaps, or their level of despair? Because we've always had people in despair. Talk to me a little bit about what you've noticed in your experience.
Sam, it has been sad to see so many young people, especially older teenagers, but sometimes even now middle schoolers, that you said the word despair, and that kind of describes a lot of them. And for many of them, it's been this idea that you find pleasure. That's what life is all about, is finding pleasure. It's all about you. You make all the decisions. And I remember many conversations similar to this, but I remember a young person talking about what a great weekend he had the week before. And he said, yeah, it was great. Went to this party and I woke up and I didn't even remember anything. I didn't even know where I was. And I said, so your life is that sad that the best thing you can do is to get so out of it, either through drugs or alcohol, that you're totally numb to, you don't even remember what happened. And he didn't quite understand where I was going with that, but that was what they were looking forward to. Every weekend was kind of sex and drugs and things like that. And that lifestyle, that if that is your main goal, is pleasure, and that pleasure is never enough, then it brings about despair. And unfortunately, we have seen a huge rise in mental health issues, as well as suicide attempts and suicide in our young people. And I think that that's part of the result of it.
Isaac, I mean, I think you raise a great point. All of you are looking at the program right now and watching us, knowing that in our own heart, all of us as people want something that fulfills, something that satisfies. We're made that way. And we either find it in things that don't satisfy or only for a moment, or we find that hope in Jesus Christ. And that's really the two choices. And in this time of COVID, policies that are changing our lives, it's affecting many people in ways perhaps never intended. And we'll talk about that with Toni McFadden when we come back in just a moment.
Truth, flexible or permanent? The Bible, ancient history, or powerfully relevant? Culture, a reflection of enlightenment or warning signs? The pastor, commentator, or frontline combatant? Every day, American Pastors Network speaks to these questions where and when they matter. With hundreds of affiliate radio stations nationwide, a website and mobile app screening today's headlines through the twin lenses of the Bible and the Constitution, educating, informing, equipping. This is the American Pastors Network. The time is now to stand in the gap for truth.
Welcome back to Stand in the Gap. I'm Isaac Crockett, joined by Sam Rohrer. And today we have a special guest with us, Toni McFadden. And we've been talking about some of the unintended consequences of all that's going on with COVID-19. And so we want to talk to Toni. Toni is a national speaker, actually even international speaker, and has written some articles, especially about pro-life, but she works with young people in biblical relationships, as well as pro-life movement issues. And so, Toni, your husband is Chris McFadden. He's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Adult Teen Challenge ministry. And so the two of you, your whole life, your ministries, your family with your children are wrapped around trying to help people, and people who many times find themselves in a predicament that maybe their family never expected to be dealing with. And even through, Adult and Teen Challenge and the outstanding help that goes on there, helping people get over in a biblical fashion these addictions that they face, to break the addiction lifestyle and to really have a lifestyle instead of a death style. I know you often talk about, but I was just wondering, between, what you hear from your husband, with what's going on there, and what you see yourself as you deal with young people and college age students a lot, I'm wondering what you're seeing as a result of being closed in. I mean, basically we're all in house arrest. Yeah. And how that is affecting many people who maybe still are struggling with things like, drug addictions or other issues going on, that this might actually make it much worse, not to mention the domestic abuse and everything that could be multiplied through a shutdown situation like this.
Right. Well, we knew something, that people being isolated, that was going to cause some unexpected harm, especially with my husband being in the ministry that he's in. Excuse me. We know that those who are in addiction, they need human interaction. And those who are still trying to overcome the addiction, they may not be in recovery right now. And so them being home, things come up, boredom, any of that, they could often go back into wanting to do drugs or whatever. But specifically, I think in Pennsylvania, Texas, Florida, there have been coroners who have said the suicide rate has increased because of this. And just thinking of families like you mentioned, who their kids are home alone, like they have to work, or they still have jobs that are essential, and yet their children, maybe they're 12, 13, 14, they're home. What are they doing all day? And so this whole piece of not informing people of how to to walk this out during this COVID is very alarming. And we've seen just from 1999 to 2019, there was a 33% increase in suicide rates. And so they have already said that just in April, they have already come up to that rate already just this year. And I think that has to do with the COVID.
So, Toni, I want you to repeat what you just said there. You gave a 30% number. Are you saying that just with what you have seen reported in April, we are at last year's numbers, or what?
Yes.
Say that again.
Mm-hmm. From 1999 to 2019, they said there was a rate of an increase of 33% in suicide. And they've already come up to that rate by April.
All right, let me ask you this, because we're talking addictions, we're talking the impact, the unintended human cost, really, of these COVID policies. You've referred to being home alone. You've talked about those kind of things that drive a person to addiction. And then perhaps if it goes too far, then it may end up in suicide. And those numbers we are seeing greatly elevated.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with me from your experience, as again related with your husband Chris at Teen Challenge, or your own life, what you've seen? What are some of those motivations in a person's life and thinking that actually drive them to an addiction, or drive them ultimately to suicide? Can you talk about some of those motivators that actually put a person in that space, and perhaps then connect that to what we're seeing as a result now of COVID-19 policies, and how they're linked?
I mean, I think it's very simple. It's hopelessness. When you don't have hope, you feel worthless. You feel like you don't have anything to live for. It doesn't matter how much technology advances and how much we think we're interacting. There's nothing that can overcome actual, real human reaction and interaction with each other. And when someone is isolated, your mind goes places that it wouldn't normally go, and you don't have someone speaking truth into your life. We're not called to live life this way. God created us to be in relationship with one another. And so, I mean, why do you think in jail they will isolate people? Even in jail, you don't want to be isolated. And so specifically with addiction as well, I read a story of a girl who knew, like, she struggles with heroin. And so she wanted to get Suboxone to kind of taper off instead of just stopping cold turkey. And it's taking so long to get medication because of COVID. You have to wait for a text message from the doctor. And she ended up overdosing, and thank goodness her boyfriend happened to be there when that happened, and was able to get her care. But it's situations like that. What if she was alone and that happened? And so, I mean, it's very alarming that they're not thinking about this. We're so concerned, and I think we should be concerned about COVID, but we also have to take extra measures for those who are not dealing with COVID in our home by themselves.
Toni, you mentioned hopelessness and the difficulty of making these hard choices that some young people are facing by themselves. And you've been in a situation even in your own life as a young lady where you were pregnant and nobody knew, and it was unexpected, it was unplanned, and that's really what has led you from your experience of not making good choices at a time when you felt alone, the most alone, as you've talked about it, and just so separated and nowhere to go to. You made decisions that now you regret, and as a mother of beautiful children, now you have a whole different situation now. But that's really what has led you into this, national circuit of talking to people about pro-life issues and considering all options. And, you talk about speaking the truth to these situations. And I just would like to get your reaction as you see governors and different, political leaders saying that we need to shut things down, and churches need to be shut down, and, non-essential businesses and even hospitals are being shut down, except for, except for emergency rooms and certain emergency care. But a lot of nurses have lost their jobs because certain surgeries are considered non-essential. We don't know what the impact of that's going to be long term yet. But while all of this is going on, life-sustaining, services only, many governors have come out fighting for the right for Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics to stay open at a time that they're closing everything else. I'd just like to get your reaction on that.
It's hard not to get angry at that. When I see governors wearing hats that say Planned Parenthood makes America great, and I hear other governors being so upset that you're not wearing a mask because you could end someone's life, yet celebrating being able to abort a baby all the way to 9 months. It's hypocrisy, and it does not make any sense. And it's hard for me to reconcile that they actually care for anyone if you don't care for the most vulnerable among us. I mean, we live in a culture of death. And so it's like they're speaking out of two sides of their mouths. One other governor saying that Planned Parenthood is life-sustaining. How can it be life-sustaining when someone always dies? And that this is not pro-woman. Abortion is not healthcare. And so I was very thankful to see that President Trump did not give funds to Planned Parenthood because of the COVID crisis. I'm very thankful for that. But it is very disheartening and very hypocritical for some of these governors to say certain things are essential and some that are not, because what that reveals their mindset that they are choosing. And I don't believe that's our place. I believe every human being is created in the image of God. Therefore, they're due respect and honor, and they deserve life from womb to tomb.
Toni, we agree with you so totally. From God's perspective, the creator of all life, that's why life is sacred. That's how hope can be given to those who have no hope. And again, we talk about that biblical worldview, and I know that's what you experienced in your life. So did Isaac and I, and those who are watching in times of hopelessness. But we're talking about here the hidden human cost of COVID-19 policies. We're talking about increased addictions, suicides, all of that as a result of these policies. We're talking about abortion right now. You shared something the other day with Isaac and I on our Stand in the Gap Today radio program that we did that I found shocking. You didn't use these words, but I'm using these words. As this creative approach to accessing doctors across the spectrum by phone has occurred, seems to me from what you were saying that the abortion doctors have been stepping into the space and have come up with a way, I'm going to use the word, figuring out a way to encourage murder by mail. Tell us what's happening here, because this is shocking.
Yeah. The telehealth for them, you can basically what they're doing is reaching out to young girls, and saying, if you find yourself in a crisis pregnancy, we're still here for you. You can have a one-on-one counseling. And so they will send you the RU486 pills. They'll send you, the Plan B. They'll send you all of that through the mail. And I mean, if you went on and tried to do it yourself, just even, they'll give it to a 12-year-old, 13-year-old. They don't care what age you are. And is it really, it just makes me so upset that this is the length that they'll go through, because they often talk about they have all these other services, but no, your service is abortion. That's what you're pushing. And what makes me so upset is that they do not give them true counsel. They're not telling them, oh, you can also do adoption, or you can keep this baby. That's not their agenda. The way they make their money is through abortion. And because there's some states who have shut down and said, no, abortion is not essential, they're finding other loopholes, or they're suing their state because of it, because that's what they stand on. They stand on death, and that's what they promote constantly. And so, yeah, they also, I just found out as well, is they have this, it's called RU, which it's a way for teenagers to connect with them if they have any questions about puberty or sex ed, or they could just type their little questions in and then they'll give them feedback. I don't know about you, but I don't want any of my kids asking Planned Parenthood for any sex advice at all.
Absolutely, Toni. This is a remarkable, ladies and gentlemen, we got to go to a break here right now as we conclude the program. But again, the hidden costs of COVID-19 policies, and I'm saying, and we say, you make policies by government without a fear of God and without a consideration for how God created man and women and humankind to function, you will create damage and hardship. We just shared two of those. We'll conclude the program in just a moment when we return.
Stand in the Gap is produced and recorded in the studios of WBPH Philadelphia, positively different television.
Welcome back to Stand in the Gap today, and we're talking with our guest, Toni McFadden, and we're talking about some of the unintended consequences from the reaction to COVID-19. And so, Toni, we've talked about the increase in helplessness and despair that leads to drug overdoses and even suicides in young people, but also for young ladies, girls who are, confused about what's going on, that are maybe getting information from Planned Parenthood and even in the mail being sent abortion pills. As we wrap up this program today, could you give our viewers any final thoughts or final information on this topic, and anything that we can do to maybe help those, or someone maybe who is listening who needs help, places we can turn to help and to see true change given?
One thing I want to say is that if a girl ends up taking the first set of the abortion pill, there is something called the abortion pill reversal, that if you change your mind, you call that number, they can help you get that reversed, because we know that is scary. So it's abortionpillreversal.com, or you can call 877-558-0333. And they can help you with that. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that and have that information. But lastly, I just want to say that God is still in control. He is still on the throne. We're his people. And so we carry hope with us. And so do not be discouraged. Do not be dismayed. God's purposes will still go forth. And he's using all of us during this time to bring hope to those who are hopeless. And so I'm just so thankful to be able to be a part of God's kingdom and to be able to share with this. And I pray that the body of Christ does rise up in this time and be the people that God wants us to be.
And Toni, a great way to conclude, that we as God's people would rise up at this time and give the hope that we have. And ladies and gentlemen, as you've been watching this program, listening to Toni McFadden, she didn't even share her testimony. I didn't have time to go there, how God miraculously changed her life years ago. Unplanned pregnancy, things happened there, but she came into contact with Jesus Christ that completely revolutionized her life, gave hope at a time of hopelessness. Well, COVID-19 policies are changing lives for all of Americans. When we can't worship together, can't gather together as our families like we used to, as believers, we can still have hope in the midst of this, and actually use this as a motivation to share that good news that we have experienced with our neighbors and with those around who, as we know, even from the numbers that Toni has shared, are driving up the numbers of addictions, mental health issues, and suicides, because these are people who don't know about Jesus Christ, who can fulfill that need. I hope that we, in the midst of this, go forward in hope in our own lives and help others. We thank you for watching here today on Stand in the Gap. If you've been never contacted us before, I'd encourage you to do so. Let us know that you are watching, that the program is helping you. Pray for us, partner with us in prayer, partner with us in finances, so that others across the country can hear and be a part of being encouraged by this information here on Stand in the Gap. And until we meet again next week at this same time, would you stand in the gap for truth where you are?